The emails always slow down long before the meetings actually stop. It starts as a subtle drop in friction. Maybe it's an email you were left off, or an invite to a Monday briefing that just disappears from your Outlook calendar. You might even be relieved. You think, good, that's one less hour spent staring at a status update spreadsheet. But here's the strange part. When the exit finally happens, the silence that follows feels absolute, and most people assume that silence means something about them. They think it's a reflection of their value. They start to believe the phone isn't ringing because their career has quietly expired. It hasn't. What you're experiencing is a very predictable pattern in the physics of a corporate exit. And once you understand how that pattern works, the silence stops feeling like a verdict and starts looking like a system behaving exactly as it was designed to. Today, we're going to look at why the network you spent decades building seems to vanish the moment the job ends, and how to keep your head level while you navigate the quiet. And the first stage of that pattern is something I think of as the delayed decay. When you leave, the silence follows a decay curve. You can almost set your watch by it. Initially, you live in the echo. You still feel like a ghost in the machine. People call your personal mobile because you're the only one who understands the why inside the old files. The manual overrides from the 2021 stock take, or the macro that glitches every Friday. You feel relevant because you're still solving things from your kitchen table. You think they'll never manage without me. But then the contraction sets in. Emergency calls stop. The team bodges a new process that works well enough. You see a LinkedIn update for a project you initiated, and you realise you no longer have a login for that world. By the time the silence becomes structural, you haven't just left the office, you've been deleted from the operating system. We're told it's all about relationships. But when the phone stops ringing, you realise a hard truth. Most of those weren't just friendships, they were a shared geography. You were a central desk. People interacted with you because you were in the path of the work. You were the one who knew how to fix a broken VLOOKUP or clear the printer when everyone else had given up. Those laughs by the kettle, they were real, but they were anchored to a place you no longer go. The people you called friends are still in that office, buried by 110% workload. They don't have the spare energy to reach out to someone who isn't in the path of their daily tasks. They haven't forgotten you. They've just been rewired to a different priority. This is where social contraction starts. You find yourself avoiding old colleagues at the supermarket on a Saturday morning because you're tired of the how's the job hunt going game. It's the sheer effort of not having a tidy answer. You don't want to say nothing, but nothing fits. It's not like you've retired. You realise that without the shared stress of the job, the connection is gone. Now that you aren't useful to the company, you get to find out who's actually still there. There's a specific psychological trap. I like to think of it as the heritage mirage. When you left, they said, we'll definitely be calling you. We can't lose that knowledge. You kept checking your phone, waiting for the emergency that only you could fix. But that call never comes. Why? Because the person now sitting in your chair is worried. Calling a predecessor feels like admitting they can't do the job. The corporate world values new over right. They would rather the department ran at 60% efficiency with a new way of working than 100% efficiency using your old one. In retail, we talked about obsolete stock. Not because the item is broken, often it's better made and more reliable than the new stuff, but a new range has taken its place on the shelf. The old barcode doesn't scan anymore, and the SKU has been deleted from the central computer. Something similar happens to the 45 to 60-year-old worker. You represent depth and context. You know where the mistakes are going to happen because you've watched them happen before. But the modern office values flexibility and lower costs over depth. This isn't a personal attack, it's a structural shift. The silence you're experiencing isn't a referendum on your quality, it's a signal that the shelf has been reset. You haven't gone off, the shop just changed the layout. The danger of this middle period is narrative instability. For 30 years, your story was simple. I work at head office, or whatever fit your role. That stops, you switch to, I'm looking for a new role. But after a few months, that story starts to feel thin. You worry the gap on your CV is the only thing people see. You start to think of it as a hole you're falling into rather than a space you're occupying. This is where the panic moves in. People start applying for jobs they'll hate just to stop the clock. We want the stress back because being busy feels like evidence that we matter. But the silence isn't a countdown to being useless. It's just the gap between the person you were forced to be for a payslip and the person you actually are when no one's telling you what to do. There is a second part to this silence. The moment you realise none of it matters anymore. Think back to that weekend you worked in 2024, the late nights spent on data reports, the office politics, the complaints about the air conditioning. It's not your problem. There's a quiet relief in realising the legacy you thought you were leaving was just a set of tasks for a company that's already moved on. You don't owe that old life any more of your thoughts. When the phone stops ringing, you haven't been locked out. You've been released. You are finally out of their control. The moment you stop caring if they've messed up the monthly figures is the moment you actually start moving forward. You aren't at the edge of a cliff. You're just in a quiet stretch of the road. The silence after influence isn't a sign that you're finished. It's just the sound of the old system switching off so you can finally listen to something else. Once you accept that the situation has changed, not that you're broken, the silence starts to be useful. The old career might be a closed file. We aren't trying to get back to the noise, we're looking at what happens next. If you're sat in a quiet pub on a Wednesday night wondering where everyone went, just remember you're the only one in the room who doesn't have to worry about the 9 a.m. meeting tomorrow. Stay level. I'll see you in the next one.